All right. I think we're good. Hopefully, this will be the last day reading Malleus Maleficarum. So, should take about 2 hours for this last bit. And here we go. Question 24. The fifth manner of sentence in the case of one under strong suspicion. The fifth method of concluding a process on behalf of the faith is used when she who is accused of heresy, after a careful examination of the merits of the process in consultation with learned lawyers, is found to be strongly suspected of heresy. And this is when the accused is not legally taken in heresy, nor has been convicted by her own confession or by the evidence of the facts or by the legitimate production of witnesses, but strong and weighty indications have been proved against her, by reason of which she is held to be under strong suspicion of heresy. The procedure in such a case is as follows. For such a person should abjure that heresy is one strongly suspected of it, in such a manner that, if she should afterwards relapse, she must be delivered to the secular court to suffer the extreme penalty, and she shall make her abjuration publicly or secretly, according to whether she is publicly or secretly suspected, or by more or less high or low, as was just said in the case of one under a light suspicion, and she must abjure that specific heresy. And the preparations for such an abjuration should be as follows. When the Sunday comes which has been fixed for the abjuration, in the hearing of the sentence or the imposition of the penance, the preacher shall deliver a general sermon. After this, the notary or clerk shall publicly read out the crimes of which the accused has been convicted, and those of which she is strongly suspected as a heretic. Then the judge or his deputy shall say to her, Behold, according to that which has been read, you are strongly suspected by us of such heresy, wherefore it behooves you to purge yourself and abjure the aforesaid heresy. And then the book of the Gospels shall be placed before her, and she shall set her hand upon it. And if she can read competently, she shall be given the following written abjuration, and shall read it in the presence of the whole congregation. But if she cannot read competently, the notary shall read it phrase by phrase, and the accused shall repeat it in a loud and audible voice, in the following manner. The notary or clerk shall say, I of such a place, and the accused person shall repeat after him the same words, but always in the vulgar tongue, and so on up to the end of the abjuration, and she shall abjure in the following manner. I, of such a place in such a diocese, standing my trial in person in presence of you, reverend lords, the bishop of such city, and the judge of the territory subject to the rule of such a lord, upon the holy gospels set before me and touched by my hands, I swear that I believe in my heart and profess with my lips that holy Catholic and apostolic faith, which the Holy Roman Church teaches, professes, preaches, and holds. Also I swear that I believe in my heart and profess with my lips that, etc. And let her pronounce the Catholic article of the faith against that heresy of which she is strongly suspected. For example, if the heresy of witchcraft is in question, let her say as follows. I swear that I believe that not only will simple heretics and schismatics be tortured in fire everlasting, but that those above all will be punished who are infected with the heresy of witches, who deny before the devil that faith which they received in holy baptism at the font, and practice demonic lewdness for the fulfillment of their evil desires, inflicting all sorts of injuries upon men and animals and the fruits of the earth. And consequently I abjure, renounce, and revoke that heresy, or rather infidelity, which falsely and mendaciously maintains that there are no witches in the world, and that no one ought to believe that those injuries can be caused with the help of devils, for such infidelity is, I now recognize, expressly contrary to the decision of our Holy Mother the Church, and of all the Catholic doctors, as also against the imperial laws which have decreed that witches are to be burned. Also I swear that I have never persistently believed in the aforesaid heresy, Neither do I believe nor adhere to it at the present, nor have I taught it, not intend to teach it, nor shall teach it. Also, I swear and promise that I will never do or cause to be done such and such, naming them, of which you hold me strongly suspected as a heretic. And if hereafter, which God forbid, I should do any of the aforesaid, I am ready to undergo the punishment provided by law for backsliders, and I am ready to submit myself to any penance which you decide to impose upon me for those deeds and words of mine for which you hold me strongly suspected of the said heresy. And I swear and promise that I will perform it to the best of my strength, and will omit no part of it, so God in this holy gospel help me. And the said abjuration shall be made in the vulgar tongue, so that it may be understood by all, unless it be made only in the presence of clerics, with a competent knowledge of the Latin tongue. But if the abjuration be made secretly in the bishop's palace or chamber, when it is not a public matter, it shall be made in a similar manner. And afterwards the bishop shall admonish her as above, to beware lest she relapse and incur the penalty of a backslider, and let the notary take care that he set it down how such abjuration was made by such a person as one strongly suspected of heresy, so that, if she should relapse, she may be punished as is proper for a backslider. And when this has been done, let the sentence or penance be pronounced in the following manner. We, bishop of such city, and brother, if he is present, inquisitor of the sin of heresy, in the domain subject to the rule of such a prince, especially deputed by the Holy Apostolic See, having in mind that you, of such a place and such a diocese, have done such and such, naming them, as lawfully appears from the carefully examined merits of the process, wherefore we reasonably hold you strongly suspected of such heresy, and have caused you to abjure it as one so suspected, being persuaded to that course by considerations of justice and the advice of men skilled in the law. But that you may be more careful in the future, nor become more prone to the like practices, and that your crimes may not remain unpunished, and that you may be an example to other sinners, having consulted with many eminent and learned lawyers, and masters or doctors of the faculty of theology, having carefully digested the whole matter, and having before our eyes only God and the truth of the Catholic Apostolic faith, having set before us the holy gospel, that our judgment may proceed as from God's countenance, and our eyes see with equity, and sitting in tribunal as judges, we condemn, or rather impose penance in the following manner upon you, standing here in person before us. Namely, that you shall never hereafter presume to do, say, or teach such and such things, and let there be set down those things of which she has been convicted, and by reason of which she was strongly suspected of the aforesaid heresy, as well as certain others which, if she were to commit them, would make her guilty of a slight relapse into heresy. But this must be as the particular nature of the case demands and requires. As, for example, that she should never wittingly follow such practices, nor receive those who she knows to have denied the faith, etc. This sentence was given, etc. But it must be noted that those who are suspected, but not taken in heresy, whether they be strongly or lightly suspected, must not be imprisoned or confined for life, for this is the punishment of those who have been heretics and afterwards repented. But they may, because of their deeds, for which they have come under suspicion, be sent to prison for a time, and afterwards, as will be seen, released. Neither are they to be branded with the sign of the cross, for such is the sign of a penitent heretic, and they are not convicted heretics, but only suspected. Therefore they are not to be marked in this way. But they can be ordered either to stand on certain solemn days within the doors of a church, or near the altar, while holy mass is being celebrated, bearing in their hands a lighted candle of a certain weight, or else to go on some pilgrimage, or something of the kind, according to the nature and requirements of the case. Question 25. The sixth kind of sentence, in the case of one who is gravely suspect. The sixth method of bringing to a conclusion a process on behalf of the faith is used when the person accused of heresy, after a careful examination of the merits of the process in consultation with learned lawyers, is found to be gravely suspected of heresy. And this is when the accused is not convicted of heresy by her own confession, or by the evidence of the facts, or by the legitimate productions of witnesses, but there are indications, not only light or even strong, but very strong and grave, which render her gravely suspected of the said heresy, and by reason of which she must be judged as one gravely suspected of said heresy. And for a clear understanding of this, we shall give examples both of a case of simple heresy and of the heresy of witches. For the case would fall under this head in simple heresy if the accused were not lawfully found convicted by his own confession, etc., as above, but for something which he had said or done. As for example, he may have been summoned in a case not concerning the faith, and have been sentenced to excommunication, and if he should continue obstinate in excommunication for a year or more, he would come under a light suspicion of heresy, for such behavior is not without some suspicion of heresy. But if he should then be summoned on a charge concerning the faith, and should not appear but contumacious contumaciously refuse to appear, and therefore be excommunicated, then he would be strongly suspected of heresy, for then the light suspicion would become a strong one, and if he remained obstinate in that excommunication for a year, then he would be gravely suspected of heresy, for then the strong suspicion would become a grave one, against which no defense is admitted, and from that time such a person would be condemned as a heretic, as shown by the Canon C. Cum Contumacia Lib. 6. An example of a grave suspicion in heresy of witches would be when the accused has said or done anything which is practiced by witches, when they wish to bewitch anyone. And it commonly happens that they are constrained to manifest themselves by threatening words, by deeds, by a look or a touch, and this is for three reasons. First, that their sins may be aggravated and more manifest to their judges. Secondly, that they may be the more easily seduced the simple, and thirdly, that God may be the more offended, and they may be granted more power of injuring men. Therefore, a witch must be gravely suspected when, after she has used such threatening words as, "I will soon make you feel," or the like, some injury has befallen the person so threatened or his cattle. For then she is not to be considered as lightly suspected, as was the case with those who are familiar with witches, or those who wish to provoke someone to inordinate love. See above, where we deal with the 3 degrees of suspicion, light, strong, and grave. Now we must consider what procedure is to be observed in such a case. For in the case of one gravely suspected of simple heresy, the following is the procedure. Although he may not in actual truth be a heretic, since there may not be any error in his understanding, or if there is, he may not cling obstinately to it in his will, nevertheless, he is to be condemned as a heretic because of the said grave suspicion against which no proof is admitted. Such a heretic is condemned in this manner. If he refuses to return and abjure his heresy and give fitting satisfaction, he is delivered to the secular court to be punished. But if he is willing and consents, he abjures his heresy and is imprisoned for life. And the same holds good in the case of one gravely suspected of the heresy of witches. But although the same method in the main is to be observed in the case of one gravely suspected of the heresy of witches, there are some differences. It is to be noted that, if the witch maintains her denial, or claims that she uttered those words not with the implied intention but in a vehement and womanish passion, then the judge has not sufficient warrant to sentence her to the flames, in spite of the grave suspicion. Therefore, he must place her in prison and cause inquiry to be made by proclamation whether she has been known to have done the like before. And if it is found that this is so, he must inquire whether she was then publicly defamed in respect of that heresy. And from this he can proceed further, so that, before all else, she may be exposed to an interrogation under the question and torture. And proceed further so that... And then, if she shows signs of such heresy, or of the taciturnity of witches, as that she should be unable to shed tears or remain insensible under torture, and quickly recover her strength afterwards, then he may proceed with the various precautions which we have already explained where we dealt with such cases. And in case all should fail, then let him take note that if she has perpetrated the like before, she is not to be altogether released, but must be sent to the squalor of prison for a year, and be tortured, and be examined very often, especially on the more holy days. But if, in addition to this, she has been defamed, then the judge may proceed in the manner already shown in the case of simple heresy, and condemn her to the fire, especially if there is a multitude of witnesses, and she had often been detected in similar or other deeds of witchcraft. But if he wishes to be merciful, he may set her a canonical purgation, that she should find 20 or 30 sponsors, sentencing her in such a way that, if she should fail in her purgation, she shall be condemned to the fire as convicted, and the judge can proceed in such a manner. And if she should purge herself, then the judge must sentence her to an abjuration of all heresy, on pain of the punishment for backsliders, together with the perpetual penance, in the following manner. The preparations for the abjuration will be the same as were explained in the fourth and fifth methods of concluding a process on behalf of the faith. Note that in all the following methods of pronouncing sentence, when the judge wishes to proceed in a merciful manner, he can act in the way we have already explained. But since secular judges use their own various methods, proceeding with rigor, but not always with equity, no fixed rule or method can be given for them as it can for an ecclesiastical judge, who can receive the abjuration and impose a perpetual penance in the following manner. I, of such a place and such a diocese, standing in person before you, my venerable lords, the bishop of such a city and judges, have touched with my hands the holy gospel placed before me, swear that I believe in my heart and profess with my lips the holy Catholic and apostolic faith, which the Holy Roman Church holds, professes, believes, preaches, and teaches. And consequently I abjure all heresy, and renounce and revoke all who raise themselves against the Holy Roman and Apostolic Church, of whatever sect or error they be. Also I swear and promise that I shall never henceforward do, say, or cause to be done such and such, naming them, which I have done and said, and for which, in my guilt, you hold me gravely suspected of the said heresy. Also I swear and promise that I will perform every penance which you wish to impose upon me for the said crimes to the best of my strength, and that I will not omit any part of it, so help me God and the Holy Gospel, and if, which God forbid, I should hereafter act in contravention of this abjuration, I here and now bind and oblige myself to suffer the due punishments for backsliders, however severe they may be. Let the notary take care to set it down that the said abjuration was made by one gravely suspected of heresy, so that if she should be proved to have relapsed, she should then be judged accordingly and delivered up to the secular court. After this, let the bishop absolve her from the sentence of excommunication which she has incurred as one gravely suspected of heresy. For when a heretic returns to the faith and abjures his heresy, he is to be released from the sentence of excommunication which is passed on all heretics. Similarly, such a one as we are considering was condemned as a heretic, as we have said, but after she has abjured her heresy, she is to be released from excommunication, and after this absolution she is to be sentenced in the following manner. We, bishop of such a city, and if he is present, judge in the territory of such lord, seeing that you, of such a place and such a diocese, have been accused before us of such and such touching the faith, naming them, and that we have proceeded to inform ourselves concerning them as justice demanded by a careful examination of the merits of the process, and of all that has been done and said in the present case, have found that you have committed such and such, naming them. Wherefore, and not without reason, holding you gravely suspected of such heresy, naming it, We have caused you, as one so suspected, publicly to abjure all heresy in general, as the canonical sanctions bid us. And since, according to those same canonical institutions, all such are to be condemned as heretics, but you, holding to wiser counsel, and returning to the bosom of our holy mother the Church, have abjured, as we have said, all vile heresy. Therefore we absolve you from the sentence of excommunication, by which you were deservedly bound, as one hateful to the Church of God. And if with true heart and faith unfeigned you have returned to the unity of the Church, you shall be reckoned from henceforth among the penitent, and as from now are received back into the merciful bosom of the Holy Church. But since it would be most scandalous to pass over with connivant eyes, and leave unpunished your offenses against God and your injuries to men, for it is graver matter to offend the divine majesty than a human monarch, and that your crimes may not be an incentive for other sinners, and that you may become more careful in the future and less prone to commit again the aforesaid crimes, and may suffer the less punishment in the next world, we, the aforesaid bishop and judge, having availed ourselves of the wise and considered advice of learned men in this matter, sitting in tribunal as judges, judging, having before our eyes only God and the irrefragable truth of the holy faith, with the holy Gospels placed before us, that our judgment may proceed as from the countenance of God, and our eyes see with equity, sentence and condemn, or rather impose penance in the following manner upon you, appearing in person before us on the day and at the hour which was before assigned to you. First, you shall put on over all the garments which you wear a gray-blue garment after the manner of a monk's scapulary, made without a hood, either before or behind, and having upon it crosses of yellow cloth, 3 palms long and 2 palms wide, and you shall wear this garment over all others for such a length of time, stating a period of 1 or 2 years, more or less as the guilt of the person demands. And in the said garment and crosses you shall stand in the door of such a church at such a time for so long, or on the 4 major feasts of the glorious Virgin, or in such and such cities in the doors of such and such churches. And we sentence and condemn you for life, or for such a period, to such a prison. Let this be set down as seems most to the honor of the faith, and according to the greater or less guilt and obstinacy of the accused. And we expressly, and in the sure knowledge that it is so ordained by the canonical institution, reserve to ourselves the right to mitigate the said penance, to increase it, change it, or remove it, in the whole or in part, as often as seems good to us. This sentence was given, etc. And when this has been read, it shall at once be duly put into execution, and she shall be clothed with the aforesaid garment, with the crosses, as has been said. Question 26. The method of passing sentence upon one who is both suspect and defamed. The 7th method of bringing to a conclusion a process on behalf of the faith is employed when the person accused of the sin of heresy, after a careful examination of the merits of the process and consultation with men learned in the law, is found to be both suspected and defamed of heresy, and this is when the accused is not legally convicted by his own confession, or by the evidence of the facts, or by the legitimate production of witnesses, but is found to be publicly defamed, and there are also other indications which render him lightly or strongly suspected of heresy, as that he has held much familiarity with heretics, and such a person must, because of his defamation, undergo a canonical purgation, and because of the suspicion against him, he must abjure the heresy. The procedure in such a case will be as follows. Such a person, being publicly defamed for heresy, and being in addition to this suspected of heresy by reason of certain other indications, shall first publicly purge himself in the manner which we explained in the 2nd method. Having performed this purgation, he shall immediately, as one against whom there are other indications of the suspected heresy, abjure that heresy in the following manner, having before him, as before, the books of the gospel. I, of such a place and such a diocese, standing my trial in person before you, my lords, bishop of such city and judge in the territory of such prince, having touched with my hands the holy gospels placed before me, swear that I believe in my heart and profess with my lips that holy apostolic faith, which the Roman Catholic Church believes, professes, preaches, and observes, and consequently I abjure, detest, renounce, and revoke every heresy which rears itself up against the holy and apostolic Church, of whatever sect or error it be, etc., as above. Also I swear and promise that I will never hereafter do or say or cause to be done such and such, naming them, for which I am justly defamed as having committed them, and of which you hold me suspected. Also I swear and promise that I will perform to the best of my strength every penance which you impose on me, nor will I omit any part of it, so help me God in this holy gospel. And if hereafter I should act in any way contrary to this oath and abjuration, which God forbid, I here and now freely submit, oblige and bind myself to the legal punishment for such, to the limit of sufferance, when it shall have been proved that I have committed such things. But it must be noted that when the indications are so strong as to render the accused, either with or without the aforesaid defamation, strongly suspected of heresy, then he shall, as above, abjure all heresy in general. And if he relapsed into any heresy, he shall suffer the due punishment of a backslider. But if the indications are so small and slight as, even taken together with the said defamation, not to render him strongly, but only lightly suspected of heresy, then it is enough if he makes not a general abjuration, but specifically abjures that heresy of which he is suspected, so that, if he were to relapse into another form of heresy, he would not be liable to the penalty for backsliders. And even if he were to relapse into the same heresy which he had abjured, he would still not be liable to the said penalty, although he would be more severely punished than would have been the case if he had not abjured. But there is a doubt whether he would be liable to the penalty for backsliders if, after his canonical purgation, he should relapse into the same heresy of which he was canonically purged. And it would seem that this would be so from the canon law, C. Excommunicamus, and C. ad aboladum. Therefore, the notary must take great care to set it down whether such a person has made his abjuration as one under a light or a strong suspicion of heresy, for, as we have often said, there is a great difference between these, and when this has been done, sentence or penance shall be pronounced in the following manner. We, bishop of such a city, or judge in the territories of such prince, having diligently in mind that you, of such a place and such a diocese, have been accused before us of such heresy, naming it, and wishing to inquire judicially whether you have fallen into the said heresy, by examining witnesses, by summoning and questioning you upon oath, and by all convenient means in our power, we have acted and proceeded as it behooved. Having digested, observed, and diligently inspected all the facts, and having discussed the merits of the process of this case, examining all in singular, which has been done and said, and having consulted with and obtained the mature opinion of many learned theologians and lawyers, we find that you have been in such a place or places publicly defamed by good and sober men for the said heresy. Wherefore, as we are bidden by the canonical institutions, we have imposed upon you a canonical purgation, by which you and your sponsors have here publicly purged yourself before us. We find also that you have committed such and such, naming them, by reason of which we have just cause to hold you strongly or lightly, let it be said whether it is one or the other, suspected of the said heresy, and therefore we have caused you to abjure heresy as one under such suspicion. Here, if he has abjured as one under strong suspicion, let them say all heresy, and if as one under light suspicion, the said heresy. But because we cannot and must not in any way tolerate that which you have done, but are in justice compelled to abominate it, that you may become more careful in the future, and that your crimes may not remain unpunished, and that others may not be encouraged to fall into the like sins, and that the injuries to the Creator may not easily be passed over. Therefore, against you, having so purged yourself and abjured, standing personally in our presence in this place at the time which was assigned to you, we, the aforesaid bishop or judge, sitting in tribunal as judges, judging, having before us the holy Gospels, that our judgment may proceed as from the countenance of God, and our eyes see with the equity, pronounce sentence or penance in the following manner, namely, that you must, etc. And let them pronounce sentence, as shall seem most to the honor of the faith, and the extermination of the sin of heresy, as that on certain Sundays and festivals he must stand at the door of such a church, holding a candle of such a weight during the solemnization of Holy Mass, with head uncovered and bare feet, and offer the said candle at the altar, and that he must fast on Fridays, and that for a certain period he must not dare to depart from that place, but present himself before the bishop or judge on certain days of the week, and any similar penance which seemed to be demanded by the particular nature of his guilt. For it is impossible to give a hard and fast rule. This sentence was given, etc., and let it be put into execution after it has been pronounced, and it can be cancelled, mitigated, or changed, as may be required by the condition of the penitent, and for his correction and humiliation, for the bishop has this power by law. Question 17. I'm getting numbers mixed up. They derp. 27. The method of passing sentence upon one who hath confessed to heresy, but is still not penitent. The eighth method of terminating a process on behalf of the faith is used when the person accused of heresy, after a careful examination of the merits of the process and consultation with learned lawyers, is found to have confessed his heresy, but to be penitent, and not truly to have relapsed into heresy, and this is when the accused has himself confessed in a court of law, under oath before the bishop and inquisitor, that he has for so long lived and persisted in that heresy of which he is accused, or in any other, and has believed in and adhered to it, but that afterwards, being persuaded by the bishop and others, he wishes to be converted, and to return to the bosom of the church, and to abjure that and every heresy, and to make sure satisfaction as they require of him. And it is found that he has made no previous abjuration of any other heresy, but is now willing and prepared to abjure. In such a case, the procedure will be as follows. Although such a person has for many years persisted in the said heresy, and even in others, and has believed and practiced them, and led many others into error, yet, if at last he has consented to abjure those heresies, and to make such satisfaction as the bishop and the ecclesiastical judge shall decree, he is not to be delivered up to the secular court to suffer the extreme penalty, nor, if he is a cleric, is he to be degraded, but he is to be admitted to mercy, according to the canon ad abolendum. And after he has abjured his former heresy, he is to be confined in prison for life. See the canon excommunicamus, where it provides for the absolution of such. But great care must be taken that he has not simulated a false penitence in order to be received back into the church. Also, the secular court is not at all bound by such a sentence as the above. He shall make his abjuration in the manner already set out, with this difference. He shall with his own mouth confess his crimes before the congregation in church on a feast day, in the following manner. The clerk shall ask him, Have you for so many years persisted in the heresy of witches? And he shall answer, Yes. And then, Have you done this and this to which you have confessed? And he shall answer, Yes. And so on. And finally, he shall make his abjuration kneeling on his knees, and since having been convicted of heresy, he has been excommunicated, after he has by abjuration returned to the bosom of the church, he is to be granted the grace of absolution. according to the manner used by the bishops with apostolic authority of absolving from major excommunication. And sentence shall at once be pronounced in the following manner: We, the bishop of such city, or the judge in the territories of such prince, seeing that you, of such a place in such a diocese, have been by public report and the information of credible persons accused before us of the sin of heresy, and since you had for many years been infected with that heresy to the great damage of your soul, and because this accusation against you has keenly wounded our hearts, we, whose duty it is by reason of the office which we have received, to plant the holy Catholic faith in the hearts of men, and to keep away all heresy from their minds, wishing to be more certainly informed whether there was any truth in the report which had come to our ears, in order that, if it were true, we might provide a healthy and fitting remedy, proceeded in the best way which was open to us, to question and examine witness and to interrogate you on oath concerning that of which you were accused, doing all this and singular which was required of us by justice in the canonical sanctions. And since we wish to bring your case to a suitable conclusion, and to have a clear understanding of your past state of mind, whether you were walking in the darkness or in the light, and whether or not you had fallen into the sin of heresy, having conducted the whole process, we summon together in council before us learned men of the theological faculty, and men skilled in both the canon and the civil law, knowing that, according to canonical institution, the judgment is sound, which is confirmed by the opinion of many. And having on all details consulted the opinion of the said learned men, and having diligently and carefully examined all the circumstances of the process, we find that you are, by your own confession, made on oath before us in the court, convicted of many of the sins of witches. Let them be expressed in detail. But since the Lord, in his infinite mercy, permits men at times to fall into heresies and errors, not only that learned Catholics may be exercised in sacred arguments, but that they who have fallen from the faith may become more humble thereafter and perform work of penitence, having carefully discussed the circumstances of this same process, we find that you, at our frequent instance and following the advice of us and other honest men, have with a healthy mind returned to the unity and bosom of the Holy Mother Church, detesting the said errors and heresies, and acknowledging the irrefragable truth of the Holy Catholic faith, laying it to your inmost heart. Wherefore, following in his footsteps, who wishes that no one should perish, we have admitted you to this adjuration and public abjuration of the said and all other heresies. And having done this, we absolve you from the sentence of major excommunication by which you were bound for your fall into heresy. And reconciling you to the Holy Mother Church, we restore you to the sacraments of the Church, provided that with a true heart and not with simulated faith, you return to the unity of the Church, as we believe and hope that you have done. But because it would be a very scandalous thing to avenge the injuries done to temporal lords, and to tolerate the offenses committed against God, the Creator of all the heavens, since it is a far greater sin to offend against the eternal than against a temporal majesty, and that God, who pities sinners, may have mercy upon you, that you may be an example for others, and that your sins may not remain unpunished, and that you may become more careful in the future, and not more prone but less apt to commit the said and any other crimes, we, the said bishop and judge, or judges, on behalf of the faith, sitting in tribunal as judges judging, etc., as above, that you put on a gray-blue garment, etc. Also we sentence and condemn you to perpetual imprisonment, there to be punished with the bread of affliction and the water of distress, reserving to ourselves the right to mitigate, aggravate, change, or remit, wholly or in part, the said sentence, if, when, and as often as it shall seem good to us to do so. This sentence was given, etc. After this, the judge shall proceed point by point, pronouncing sentence in the following or some similar manner. My son, your sentence or penance consists in this, that you bear this cross during the whole period of your life, that you stand so bearing it on the altar steps or in the door of such churches, and that you be imprisoned for life on bread and water, But, my son, lest this may seem too hard for you, I assure you that if you patiently bear your punishment, you will find mercy with us. Therefore, doubt not nor despair, but hope strongly. After this, let the sentence be duly executed, and let him put on the said garment, and be placed on high upon the altar steps, in full view of the people as they go out, surrounded by the officers of the secular court. And at the dinner hour, let him be led by the officers to prison, and the rest of the sentence be carried out, and duly performed. And after he is led out through the door of the church, let the ecclesiastical judge have no more to do with the matter. And if the secular court be satisfied, it is well, but if not, let it do its pleasure. Question 28. The method of passing sentence upon one who hath confessed to heresy but is relapsed, albeit not now penitent. The ninth method of arriving at a conclusive sentence in a process on behalf of the faith is used when the person accused of heresy, after a careful investigation of the circumstances of the process and consultation with men of good judgment, is found to have confessed her heresy and to be penitent, but that she is truly relapsed. And this is when the accused herself confesses in court, before the bishop or judges, that she has at another time abjured all heresy, and this is legally proved, and that she has afterwards fallen into such heresy or error, or that she has abjured some particular heresy, such as that of witches, and has afterwards returned to it. But that, following better advice, she is penitent, and believes the Catholic faith, and returns to the unity of the Church. Such a one is not, if she humbly asks for them, to be denied the sacraments of penance and the Eucharist. But however much she may repent, she is nevertheless to be delivered up as a backslider to the secular court to suffer the extreme penalty. But it must be understood that this refers to one who has made her abjuration as one manifestly taken in heresy, or as one strongly suspected of heresy, and not one who has so done as being under only a light suspicion. The following procedure must be observed in this case. When after mature and careful and, if necessary, repeated investigation by learned men, it has been concluded that the said prisoner has actually in prepense relapsed into heresy, the bishop or judge shall send to the said prisoner in the place of detention 2 or 3 honest men, especially religious or clerics, who are zealous for the faith, of whom the prisoner has no suspicion, but rather places confidence in them, and they shall go in to her at a suitable time, and speak to her sweetly of the contempt of this world and the miseries of this life, and of the joys and glory of paradise, and, leading up from this, they shall indicate to her, on the part of the bishop or judge, that she cannot escape temporal death, and that she should therefore take care for the safety of her soul, and prepare herself to confess her sins and receive the sacrament of the Eucharist. And they shall visit her often, persuading her to penitence and patience, strengthening her as much as they can in the Catholic truth, and they shall diligently cause her to confess, so that she may receive the sacrament of the Eucharist at her humble petition, for these sacraments are not to be denied to such offenders. And when she has received these sacraments, and been well disposed by these men to salvation, after 2 or 3 days during which they have strengthened her in the Catholic faith, and induced her to repentance, the bishop or judge of that place shall notify the bailiff of the place or the authorities of the secular court, that on such a day at such an hour, not a feast day, he should be with his attendants in such a square or place, but it must be outside a church, to receive from their court a certain backslider whom the bishop and judge will hand over to him. And on the morning of the day fixed, or on the day before, it shall be publicly proclaimed throughout the city of place, in those towns and villages where such proclamations are customary, that on such a day at such an hour, in such a place, there will be a sermon preached in defense of the faith, and that the bishop and other judges will condemn a certain person who has relapsed into the sin of heresy, delivering her up to the secular justice. But here it must be considered that, if he who has so relapsed should have been ordained in any holy orders, or should be a priest or a religious of any order, before he is handed over, he is to be degraded and stripped of the privileges of his ecclesiastical order. And so, when he has been degraded from all ecclesiastical office, let him be handed over to secular justice to receive his due punishment. When therefore such a one is to be degraded from his orders and handed over to the secular court, let the bishop summon together all the prelates and religious men of his diocese. For in this case, though not in others, only the bishop together with the other prelates and religious and learned men of his diocese can degrade one who has received holy orders when he is to be delivered to the secular court, or is to be imprisoned for life for the sin of heresy. On the day appointed for the degrading of the backslider, and the handing of him over to the secular court, if he be a cleric, or if he be a layman, for leaving him to hear his definitive sentence, the people shall gather together in some square or open place outside the church, and the inquisitor shall preach a sermon, and the prisoner shall be set on a high place in the presence of the secular authorities. And if the prisoner be a cleric who is to be degraded, the bishop shall don his pontifical robes, together with the other prelates of his diocese, in their vestments and copes. And the prisoner shall be clothed and robed, as if he were to minister his office. And the bishop shall degrade him from his order, beginning from the higher and proceeding to the lowest. And just as in conferring holy orders, the bishop uses the words ordained by the church, so in degrading him, he shall take off his chasuble and stole, and so with the other vestments, using words of a directly opposite meaning. When this degradation has been accomplished, the proceedings must continue in the legal and accustomed manner, and the notary or religious or clerk shall be bidden to read the sentence, which shall be after the following manner, whether the prisoner be a layman or a degraded cleric. We, by the mercy of the God Bishop of such city, and judge in the territories of such prince, seeing that we are legitimately informed that you, of such a place and such a diocese, have been before us, or before such bishop and judges, accused of such heresy or heresies, naming them, of which you were lawfully convicted by your own confession and by witnesses, and that you had obstinately persisted in them for so long, but afterwards, listening to better advice, publicly in such a place abjured, renounced, and revoked those heresies in the form provided by the church, on which account the said bishop and inquisitor, believing that you had truly returned to the bosom of the holy church of God, did absolve you from the sentence of excommunication, by which you were bound, enjoining upon you a salutary penance, if with true heart and faith unfeigned you had returned to the unity of the Holy Church. But whereas after all the aforesaid in the lapse of so many years, you are again accused before us, and have again fallen into such heresies which you had abjured, naming them, and though it was sore grief to us to hear such things of you, yet we were by justice compelled to investigate the matter, to examine the witnesses, and to summon and question you on oath, proceeding in each and every way as we are bidden by the canonical institutions. And since we wish to conclude this case without any doubt, we convened in solemn council learned men of the theological faculty, and men skilled in the canon and the civil law, and in consultation with them maturely and carefully examined all in singular which had been done, said and seen in the process, and diligently discussed each circumstance, weighing all equally in the balance as it behooved us. And we find both by the legitimate evidence of witnesses and by your own confession received in court that you have fallen into the heresies which you had abjured. For we find that you have said or done such and such, let all be named, on account of which, with the concurrence of the said learned men, we have judged and now judge that you are a backslider, according to the canonical institutions, to which we refer and grieve to refer. But since it has come to the knowledge of us and of many honest Catholic men, that, by the inspiration of divine grace, you have once more returned to the bosom of the church and to the truth of the faith, detesting the aforesaid errors and heresies, and with true orthodoxy, unfeigned believing, and protesting the Catholic faith, we have admitted you to receive the Church's sacraments of penance in the Holy Eucharist at your humble request. But since the Church of God has no more which it can do in respect of you, seeing that it has acted so mercifully towards you, in the manner we have said, and you have abused that mercy by falling back into the heresies which you had abjured. Therefore we, the said bishop and judges, sitting in tribunal as judges judging, having before us the holy Gospels, that our judgment may proceed as from the countenance of God, and our eyes see with equity, and having before our eyes only God and the irrefragable truth of the holy faith, and the extirpation of the plague of heresy, against you, in this place on the day and at the hour before assigned to you for the hearing of your definitive sentence, we pronounce and sentence that you have truly fallen back into the sin of heresy. Although you are penitent, and as one truly so relapsed, we cast you forth from this our ecclesiastical court, and leave you to be delivered to the secular arm. But we earnestly pray that the said secular court may temper its justice with mercy, and that there be no bloodshed or danger of death. And here the bishop and his assessors shall withdraw, and the secular court shall perform its office. It is to be noted that, although the bishop and inquisitor ought to use their utmost diligence, both by their own efforts and those of others, to induce the prisoner to repent and return to the Catholic faith, yet after he has repented and it has been decided in council that, though he is penitent, he is nevertheless truly a backslider, and as such to be handed over in person to the secular court, they ought not to inform him of such a sentence and punishment. Therefore, from that time, neither before nor after the sentence should they present themselves before him, that he be not moved in his spirit against them, a thing which is very carefully to be avoided in death of this sort. But as we have said, let them send to him some honest men, especially those in religious orders, or clerics, in whom he has confidence, and let them inform him of the sentence to come, and of his death, and strengthen him in the faith, exhorting him to have patience, and let them visit him after the sentence, and console him and pray with him, and not leave him until he has rendered his spirit to his Creator. Let them therefore beware, and be on their guard, not to do or say anything which may enable the prisoner to anticipate his death, or place themselves in an irregular position. And as they have burdened themselves with the care of his soul, let them then share also in his punishment and guilt. It must also be remarked that such a sentence which delivers a person to the secular court ought not to be pronounced on a festival or solemn day, nor in a church, but outside in some open space, for it is a sentence which leads to death, and it is more decent that it should be delivered on an ordinary day and outside the church, for a feast day and the church are dedicated to God. Question 29. The method of passing sentence upon one who hath confessed to heresy, but is impenitent, although not relapsed. The 10th method of completing a process on behalf of the faith by a final sentence is used when the person accused of heresy, after a careful examination of the circumstances of the process and consultation with skilled lawyers, is found to have confessed his heresy and to be impenitent, though he has not relapsed into the heresy. Such a case is very rarely found, but yet it has come within the experience of us inquisitors. In such a case, therefore, the bishop and judge must not be in haste to sentence the prisoner, but must keep him well guarded and fettered, and induce him to be converted, even to the extent of several months, showing him that, by remaining impenitent, he will be damned in body and soul. But if neither by comforts nor hardships, nor by threatening nor persuasion, can he be brought to renounce his errors, and the appointed period of grace has expired, let the bishop and judges prepare to deliver or abandon him to the secular court, and they shall give notice to the herald or bailiff, or secular authorities, that on such a day, not a feast, and at such an hour, they should be in such a place with their attendants outside of church, and that they will deliver to them a certain impenitent heretic. Nonetheless, they shall themselves make public proclamation in the customary places that on such a day, at such a time, in the aforesaid place, a sermon will be preached in defense of the faith, and that they will hand over a certain heretic to secular justice, and that all should come and be present, being granted the customary indulgences. After this, the prisoner shall be delivered to the secular court in the following manner, but let him first be often admonished to renounce his heresy and repent. But if he altogether refuses, let the sentence be pronounced. We, by the mercy of God, bishop of such a city, or judge in the territories of such prince, seeing that you, of such a place and such a diocese, have been accused before us by public report and the information of credible persons, naming them, of heresy, and that you have for many years persisted in those heresies to the great hurt of your immortal soul, and since we, whose duty it is to exterminate the plague of heresy, wishing to be more certainly informed of this matter, and to see whether you walked in darkness or the light, have diligently inquired into the said accusation, summoning and duly examining you, we find that you are indeed infected with the said heresy. But since it is the chief desire of our hearts to plant the holy Catholic faith in the hearts of our people, and to eradicate the pest of heresy, we have used diverse and various suitable methods, both by ourselves and by others, to persuade you to renounce your said errors and heresies in which you had stood, were standing, and even now defiantly and obstinately stand with stubborn heart. But since the enemy of the human race is present in your heart, wrapping you up and entangling you in the said errors, and you have refused and yet refused to abjure the said heresies, choosing rather the death of your soul in hell and of your body in this world, than to renounce the said heresies and return to the bosom of the church and cleanse your soul, and since you are determined to remain in your sin. Therefore, inasmuch as you are bound by the chain of excommunication from the Holy Church, and are justly cut off from the number of the Lord's flock, and are deprived of the benefits of the church can do no more for you, having done all that was possible. We, the said bishop and judges, on behalf of the faith, sitting in tribunal as judges judging, and having before us the holy Gospels, that our judgment may proceed as from the countenance of God, and our eyes see with equity, and having before our eyes only God, in the truth of the holy faith, in the extirpation of the plague of heresy, on this day and at this hour and place assigned to you for the hearing of your final sentence, we give it as our judgment and sentence that you are indeed an impenitent heretic, and as truly such, to be delivered and abandoned to the secular court. Wherefore, by this sentence we cast you away as an impenitent heretic from our ecclesiastical court, and deliver or abandon you to the power of the secular court, praying the said court to moderate or temper its sentence of death against you. This sentence was given, etc. Question 30. Of one who has confessed a heresy, is relapsed, and also impenitent. The 11th method of concluding and terminating a process on behalf of the faith is used when the person accused of heresy, after a diligent discussion of the circumstances of the process in consultation with learned men, is found to have confessed her heresy and to be impenitent, and to have relapsed into it. And this is when the accused confesses with her own mouth in court that she believes and has practiced such and such. The procedure in this case is the same as that above, and because she is manifestly a heretic, sentence shall be pronounced in the following manner, in the presence of the bishop and judges. We, by the mercy of God, bishop of such city, or judge in the territories of such prince, seeing that you, of such a place and such a diocese, were formerly accused before us, or before such and such our predecessors, of the crime of heresy, naming them, and that you were legally convicted of that crime by your own confession and the testimony of worthy men, and that you obstinately persisted in it for so many years? But that afterwards, having listened to better advice, you publicly abjured those heresies in such a place and in the form required by the Church, on which account the aforesaid bishop and judge, believing that you had truly renounced the said errors and had returned with Catholic faith to the bosom of the Church, granted you the benefit of absolution, releasing you from the sentence of excommunication by which you were formerly bound, and setting you a salutary penance, if with true heart and faith unfeigned you remained converted to the unity of the Holy Church, received your back in mercy. For the Holy Church of God is not closed to such as return to her bosom. But after all the aforesaid, you have, to our great grief, been accused before us of having again fallen into those damnable heresies, which you formerly abjured in public. Yea, you have done so, and so, naming them, in contravention of the said abjuration and to the damage of your soul. And although we are sore wounded and cut to the heart to have heard such things of you, yet we were in justice compelled to inquire into the matter, to examine the witnesses, and to summon and question you on oath, as it behooved us, and in every particular to proceed as we are bidden by the canonical institutions. And as we wished to conclude this case beyond any doubt, we summoned a solemn council of men learned in the theological faculty and of those skilled in the canon and civil laws. And having obtained the mature and considered judgment of the said learned men upon every single particular which had been brought to notice, and done in this case, after repeated examination of the whole process and careful and diligent discussion of every circumstance, as law and justice demanded, we find that you are legally convicted, both by the evidence of credible witnesses and by your own repeated confession, that you have fallen and fallen again into the heresies which you abjured. For we find that you have said or done such and such, naming them. Wherefore we have reason, in the opinion of the said learned men, and compelled thereto by your own excesses, to judge you as a backslider according to the canonical decrees. And that we say this with grief, and grieve to say it. He knows from whom nothing is hid, and who seeth into the secrets of all hearts. And with all our hearts we desired and still desire to lead you back to the unity of the Holy Church, and to drive out from your heart the said foul heresy, that you may save your soul, and preserve your body and soul from the destruction in hell. And we have exerted our utmost endeavor by various fitting methods to convert to salvation. But you have been given up to your sin, and led away and seduced by an evil spirit, and have chosen to be tortured with fearful and eternal torment in hell, and that your temporal body should be consumed in the flames, rather than to give ear to better counsels, and renounce your damnable and pestilent errors, and to return to the merciful bosom of our Holy Mother Church. Wherefore, since the Church of God can do nothing more for you, having done all that was possible to convert you, we, the bishop and judges named in this case on behalf of the faith, sitting in tribunal as judges judging, having before us the holy Gospels, that our judgment may proceed as from the countenance of God, and our eyes see with equity, and having before our eyes only God, and the honor of the holy Catholic faith, on this day, at this hour and place, before assigned to you for the hearing of your final sentence, we pronounce judgment upon you, here present before us, and condemn and sentence you as a truly impenitent and relapsed heretic, and as such to be delivered or abandoned to secular justice. And by this our definitive sentence, we cast you out as a truly impenitent and relapsed heretic from our ecclesiastical court, and deliver and abandon you to the power of the secular court, praying that the said secular court will temper or moderate its sentence of death against you. This sentence was given, etc. Alright, we're going to stop there because my voice is starting to go. So it's going to be one more day. So next Monday, we'll take up question 31. And I'll be right back. And we'll do some gaming.